It's truly my honor to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity and the great seminar that we've had here with our summit with Quad A. You guys have done a phenomenal job, and thanks for everything you've done for our soldiers. Last night was truly remarkable with our Hall of Fame inductees, and I'll tell you, it was truly humbling to know that those that have come before us, to be able to see those icons, those heroes up here being brought into the Hall of Fame, but to also be able to look at them and see what's in them and our soldiers that are out there in the field today. So that to me is truly special, that we are their legacy, and we can be very proud that they're carrying that on. Now, I would tell you that our branch has always been at its best during the most difficult times. And, you know, we've certainly talked a lot about how challenging the times are today, but I would tell you that, you know, that's where the opportunities are at. And frequently that's when we find opportunities, is when the chips are a little bit down, and it forces us to have to really focus, to look at what's most important, not necessarily what's urgent, to look at those things that we need to go after that are truly where we need to focus as a team. And so I think that's where our focus is right now. That's where my focus will be, is what are those opportunities? What is the right time to go after those opportunities so we can continue to make Army aviation the most decisive component in land warfare? So let's go to the next slide. So, you know, we've talked about the OE, but I would tell you a lot of the discussion that we've been having is really kind of the fiscal aspect of it, and that is one component of the operational environment. But as we look, you know, at requirements and where the branch is going to go and where we need to head in the future, you know, there are many other things out there that are really influencing how we're taking a perspective on material solutions, our doctrine, our organization. It is not just being purely driven by money. And we've got to be very careful that that's not the sole driver, that we've got to make the right choices. And sometimes if we just look from a fiscal perspective, it may drive us to make some poor decisions or poor choices with respect to the other components of the OE. We're facing some very real threats out there, some very dynamic threats. From a hybrid perspective, as we look around the world, there are places that we're not, you know, that we're going to have to really take a very close look at from our doctrine, our material solutions, to be able to operate in those kind of environments. And I think General McConville got to that earlier in his comments about how we've got to get back to some of our core competencies and how do we look at our particular capabilities to be able to operate in these different threat environments. And I would tell you that we've got to be very careful also about trying to predict the future or be very definitive about what we think the future is going to look like, because we've seen just in the recent months that it's very dynamic, it's unpredictable, the speed of human interaction is out there. So what that needs to drive us to is that we've got to be versatile, we've got to be adaptive, we have to think when we're building material solutions or developing our doctrine, where do we have the flexibility to adapt and change as fast as the speed of decision out there on the battlefield? So again, that's another area we're going to take a close look at. And then just the reduction in permanent presence forward. You know, when I was a young lieutenant, I came in, there was almost as many soldiers in Germany as we're going to have in our Army here over the next 5 years. That's a pretty remarkable shift, and that's just forward presence in one location. And as we think about, you know, all around the world and where our soldiers are out there and how we're kind of pulling back to a CONUS-based Army, even though we're going to do regionally aligned forces, we do need to think about the expeditionary component of this. How do we operate in smaller units to be able to operate with regionally aligned forces and move away from kind of this traditional set that we have to operate at the battalion task force level? Again, another area we'll take a look at. And I think as we look to our partners, and we certainly, you know, down at Fort Rucker, we get an appreciation with 46 or 47 different nations there training with us. And as we go around, the multinational component, and I would tell you the interdependence with our multinational partners and our soft conventional force interdependence, as well as our joint work that we do with our other unified action partners, is an area that can atrophy as we move in. I mean, it's an opportunity that we can lose if we're not careful. It can be driven away by the budget because each can go to their corner. They can only look at their piece of the pie. And so again, we've got to think about how do we get after that, and I'll talk some about this here in a little while, so we can make sure that we don't lose that interdependence that we've built with our partners out there around the world. And then our operational requirements continue to grow. The list is not getting smaller, even though the Army is getting smaller. Our requirements are going up. So how do we restructure, make sure that we've got the most agile capabilities out there to be able to address these different requirements around the world? And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But I'll tell you that, you know, it really does get down to We've got to maintain training overmatch, we've got to maintain leader overmatch, and we've got to maintain our technology overmatch as we move to the future. All right, next slide. So as we think about where the branch is going, for me, we're going to remain an indispensable component of strategic land warfare. And we've got to continue to be able to provide ground maneuver commanders. Again, we've got to be ground-centric. That's where we've got to focus on our commanders and soldiers, maintaining that shared understanding, that trust that we've built over the last 13 years of war. We've got to continue to drive that home and be able to provide them the speed and agility that they need with the lethality, survivability, and the depth throughout that battlefield to be able to prevent, shape, and win. And so we're going to do this through restructuring our force. We've talked a lot about ARI. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide of why we're doing that. I think we've hit it pretty hard during this session. But being able to go to a pure fleet of modernized aircraft, absolutely critical. Being able to buy out our entire acquisition objective. That's what ARI is going to allow us to be able to do. That was absolutely critical. Being able to update, we're right now in the process of updating all of our doctrine for unified land operations with an air-ground operations focus. And that's a pretty significant shift. Initially we looked, we had a little bit in there on air-ground integration. There was some on manned-unmanned teaming, but it was not fully integrated, and that's where we're moving to with an integrated doctrine. And then as we look around the Army at home station, we had a great session yesterday with the commanders talking about how do we reinvigorate home station training, not only commander-driven, but also in our PME and other courses that we're doing to be able to drive better training management and soldiers and leaders understanding how do we train at home station to be able to maintain that training overmatch. And then what are we doing, in fact, in the school to make sure that, we're producing, leaders and soldiers that are competent in their fundamental skills, but also moving them more towards the warfighting art piece, and we're going to get after that. And then finally, being able to protect our S&T efforts and modernize our fleet as we move forward, and there's a lot of effort there. But again, we've got to keep it focused, and it has to be on those things that are most relevant and most important. But fundamentally, what it is all about, and we've been talking about this, is it'll be underpinned by our soldiers and our leaders, because it's not the machines that we fly, it's really those that fly and fight them and maintain them. Next slide. So ARI, I'll hit a few points on this, but I think we've kind of addressed this in detail, but what it does for us, the flexibility that ARI brings to us, the fact that it allowed us to keep the most modernized aircraft and the most structure out of all the other options. And it's not like we didn't have a lot of options. The initial salami slice cut was pretty ugly for everybody. And we lost a lot of combat power, we lost a lot of modernized aircraft, we lost a lot of flexibility, and we didn't have the capability to really fix some of the smaller things, so we were missing some opportunities. So ARI allowed us to be able to restructure, to be able to protect those modernized aircraft. It best meets the attack signal out there, the attack demand signal for the attack aircraft. With only 22 shooting battalions, it's a low density capability, and looking at the demand signal coming out of the strategic planning guidance and some of the scenarios that were out there, the only way it could be met is if we could turn attack battalions on a 1-to-1. That's why they had to be in the active component. That's really the fundamental driver. Because if you look for, if you split it between the components, it takes 3 to make 1. We couldn't afford that. So that's the real driver behind moving the attack battalions into the active component. As we look at, but we also, with the original salami slice cut that we were taking with the POM Alt, or Alt POM, we put really at risk all of the modernization efforts that we had going in the Guard as well. It put 47F at risk, it put Mike models at risk, it put digital Lima at risk. So we're able to protect all of that now that we've been able to go with ARI and increase our assault capability, adding 111 aircraft. And frankly, that is a delta across aviation. As you look at where we have gaps, we have a huge gap in our assault and lift capability. When we start looking at what capabilities we need out there, we still have a shortage to meet the demand signal. And so being able to increase more lift was important. And then as we looked at Fort Rucker, being able to modernize our rotary wing training fleet. And not only will that allow us to have a new modern aircraft down there, it will be better suited as a dual engine glass cockpit, but it's also going to allow us to restructure how we do flight school, to be able to get back into flight school especially in basic combat skills and bring back advanced combat skills, because we're not having to spend as much time transitioning between aircraft. We're going to be able to buy back some of that POI to be able to get into the warfighting skills that frankly have kind of fallen out in the middle phases there in flight school. So when they move into their advanced aircraft or their modernized aircraft, we'll be able to focus more on the warfighting components as opposed to just learning how to fly the airplane. So as we've looked at the program of instruction, I think we're going to be able to add a lot more back in to be able to produce a much better aviator, a much better warfighter out to the force that the new modernized training aircraft will bring to us. So where we're focused from an ARI perspective, first and foremost, I talked about this yesterday, is how do we develop and keep our best talent? Because 10,000 soldiers are going to leave Army Aviation over the next 5 years. Now that cut compared to what's happening in the rest of the branches is significantly less, frankly. We were able to protect a lot more of our soldiers and our structure. And the chief's been, as well as the vice mentioned yesterday, based on what Army Aviation brings to the force, there were some very conscious decisions to be able to protect as much of that as they can. But that's still a significant number of our soldiers that are coming out of our force. And as you look around Army Aviation, I said this yesterday as well, we're a very high quality branch. Our soldiers, we don't have a lack of quality. We're definitely not hurting for quality. So that's going to be very tough on our soldiers. So one, leaders need to be talking to them. Two, the branch, we've got to be communicating, as well as HRC, so everybody clearly understands, because there is a lot of concern out there in the force right now, and I understand that as we work through these very complex plans on how we're going to transition, soldiers in the reserve component, soldiers in the active component to different airframes, who's going to be coming out of the force and who we're going to be keeping. So again, this is going to take a lot of engaged leadership from the branch, from HRC, and with our brigade commanders. And we'll be continuing to work that as we move forward. A lot of these plans are being developed right now in detail. And then really continuing to support the warfighter forward. As General McConnell said, we're still in the fight, and we're going to be in the fight for a while. And it's very easy to lose sight of that with all of the budget wars going on, ARI and other transitions. But first and foremost, we've got to make sure that our brigades that are deployed forward and all the units that are deployed around the world, that they receive our support first and foremost, and we'll continue to stay focused on that piece. And then one concern, mentioned this yesterday in the Q&A, as we go through ARI and we transition formations, that there's a period of risk there, and we've got to do that right. As we move aircraft out of one formation, we need to make sure that we don't have a significant drop in readiness. So the timing and synchronization, we'll work that very closely with the National Guard Bureau. Mike Bobick and I have been in great discussions already, and we've got some detailed work to do next week. But also on the active component, and then working with the PEO on how we field aircraft, make sure the net training's right. Getting that timing is going to take a lot of very detailed work, a lot of synchronization, integration, and on top of that, we don't know what the future looks like from, what's going to happen in 15, 16, and 17 for operational commitments, and that can always cause turbulence in that. So that'll certainly be an area that we're going to be focused on. And I mentioned already that we're already well underway on adapting and redefining how we're going to do flight school, as well as all of our MOS producing courses that are up at Fort Eustis. I don't see any issues with those right now. We're going to be able to have the capacity that we need to be able to do the transitions, as long as the resourcing stays protected, which we've been assured that it is. That's in the TTPEG. And I know the G8's already said he's going to keep that protected for us, sir. Oh. When you have the pulpit, you got to put them on public record. And then I would tell you, talking to the brigade commanders, and the CTC OCs, our senior OCs out there, we've got to get after home station training and our combat training centers, reinvigorating that, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. So next slide. Just real quick on doctrine. We've basically taken a number of doctrinal manuals, and we're doing away with them. We're going to have one capstone doctrine, 3-04. Right now we're in development of what the structure of the document looks like. So we're in a complete rewrite, and next week I've got a writing team that I'm meeting with to make sure that we've got the structure right. But it will be our one capstone doctrine. That's going to be Army Aviation, and it's going to be focused on air-ground operations. and it's basically how we conduct unified land operations or in support of unified land operations. So we'll be working that. We're going to staff that out with the brigades. I know you guys are busy, but I'd appreciate your feedback as we do that so we can make sure we get this right in the future. And then it'll be supported by a number of techniques manuals that will come out. And those will be on mission command, tactical employment techniques. We've got a classified one that's going to be on survivability, and then sustainment techniques. And those are all coming out in 15 as we move forward. So that's kind of where we're at right now in doctrine. And again, we've got a significant effort. This is a complete rewrite. It nests with Doctrine 2015 that's been rewritten for all of the branches are rewriting their doctrine right now. And the ADPs and ADRPs, which are the small, 10-page and 100-page doctrinal primers, those are all done. And now we're moving into the field manuals, which are about 200 pages. And then the technique manuals will support that. Next slide. As we look at home station training, this is another area that we're taking a re-emphasis or a refocus in the branch to be able to move forward. We've lagged a little bit in aviation on being integrated into the integrated training environment, frankly. The instrumentation component of it, we've got some work to do there. We're in good shape on AVCAT. We're moving forward to modernize that program. But to be fully integrated into the integrated training environment, which is where the Army is moving to, and it's fielded to 7 locations right now around the Army, and it'll end up in 17 different locations. Aviation's got to be a part of that. Got to be a part and parcel of that. And it's our ability to tie in at home station where we're doing brigade level exercises to be able to support our commanders on the ground. And if we're not tied into the integrated training environment, we're going to have challenges. That leaves us on the outside looking in. So that's an area that I'm very focused on right now to get that fixed. I think there's some pretty easy solutions. I think we can get the resources to do it. It's just really, we've got to focus on it, and that'll be something that we're pushing to this year to get fully integrated into that. We've done a lot of great work out at the CTCs, improving the TADs that are out there, the training aids and devices that are out there to be able to improve the realism. And then a lot of work with TRADOC, especially the training brain repository. So right now, units can actually go in and there's a repository where we're hanging all these exercise products. So you can go in and use other units, stuff that they're doing, so you can share and collaborate. And that's already underway. And we've started hanging products from Fort Rucker there. So we do have a central repository where training products are at, and we're passing that information out to the commanders right now. But again, that's an area that we can continue to work on, of how do we do, increase the realism, the rigor, and challenge our soldiers at home station to be able to train the way we fight. And then finally, we talked a little bit about, the aviation training exercise that was done at Fort Rucker. That's no longer done there. That was a conscious decision by TRADOC based on resourcing and other things. But now we've got the aviation brigades fully integrated in the Mission Command Training Program. And it's not MCTP of old, to where they showed up as a response cell and didn't have OCs. They're actually a full training audience with a full OC package, fully integrated into the exercise. As a matter of fact, we've done several exercises where we've had 2 combat aviation brigades participate. So that is replacing the ATX, and then we've got some home station products, capabilities, CPXF, and a few others that units can use to train at home station and prepare for those. So where are we focused right now? We've got to increase in PME. How do we get our leaders to better understand unit training management? Those capabilities that are out there, because we have captains, lieutenants that don't understand that. We have majors, some lieutenant colonels that don't necessarily understand that. So we're focused on that in both the career course, as well as a little bit in BOLIC, and certainly in PCC. We've got a very heavy focus on spend most of a day talking to the commanders about unit training management. We're going to do some additional emphasis on that. I would also tell you that at the school, we're also using a lot of virtual constructive and gaming capabilities in the captain's career course, in BOLIC, in the NCOA courses, to where they get exposed to those home station capabilities that are out there. So when they leave the institution, not only do we get the training value out of the institution with our simulations, but they know how to use it when they get out to their units. We're training them how to train. So again, another area we're going to focus on. And as we look at material solutions, really for industry, this is an area that I talked about this at AUSA Aviation, that we need help. We've got to take a hard look at trainability. How do we move some of the complexity behind the faceplate so we can reduce what we expect our soldiers to do, so we can spend less time in the institution training, people how to push buttons, and more time being able to train people on how to warfight. So as we look at developing future documents, that's one of the key capabilities that we're going to look at is trainability. How do we reduce that complexity so we can focus more on the art as opposed to the science? And then finally, we're doing a lot of work with the DAG3 DOT on trying to link all of our combined arms training strategies to our flying hour program so we can show the value, because that, again, it gets to a bang for the buck, and being able to protect resources, you've got to show the bang for the buck. So we're doing a lot of work there to be able to do these linkages so we can protect the home station op-tempo flight hours, because when the Axeman comes, if you can't clearly show the linkage and show how it needs to be protected and justify it, then it's really easy to lose that. So that's an area that we're very focused on right now, is to be able to protect the hours that we do have at home station to be able to train. Next slide. So in the school, some areas that we're looking at right now, we've done a lot of work on BOLIC, the Basic Officer Leader course, as well as the Warrant Officer course. They were combined. They had the same POI. We've now split them. They're going to have two separate POIs, so our lieutenants and our warrant officers are going to get a focused entry-level officer training. And then on top of that, we split the course, and we're doing part of it up front before flight school, and then when they come out of flight school, we go into another 3 weeks of it where they go into some exercises and some focused topics that'll better prepare them, because we found that quite a few things were atrophying while they're in a year of flight school before they got out to the force. So we're going to hit them again before they go back out, specifically on training, maintenance, and command supply discipline. So I think that's going to be helpful to the commanders, that you're not going to have a lieutenant or a young warrant officer that shows up to you that's forgotten everything they learned a year previous in either BOLIC or WOBIC. We're also doing a lot of work in the advanced course. Track specific. I've been over there, got a lot of great feedback. TRADOC kind of went to the Common Core, and I'm pushing back on that, because frankly, we've got to keep our warrant officer courses more focused on aviation, the technical aspects of it, and the leadership components that we need in aviation. And frankly, I think the Common Core that we've got out there is too broad and takes up too much of the POI, and there wasn't enough of aviation in these courses. So we're working with CAC and TRADOC to get that corrected. And I talked to Dave Williams, who's the new senior warrant up on the DA staff, about that as well this past week. So I think we're on the right path there with these focused tracks that we have, and the feedback from the students has been tremendous. So I think that's a huge change that's recently been implemented. Additionally, if some of you may be familiar with the Project Warrior program, how do we bring more experience into TRADOC to put the right instructors on the platform, the right SGLs, small group leaders in there that are training our captains or educating our captains and our lieutenants. So that is alive and well. We're working with the brigade commanders and HRC. We've already got about 3 in the mill that are going to be showing up this summer and next summer from the CTCs to be able to increase the quality, continue to increase the quality of our instructors. And we're doing the same thing with our warrant officer basic course, is pulling very high quality instructor pilots and maintenance officers and safety officers off of the flight line out there. We're hand selecting them to be able to come in and be SGLs. So we've got the right mentors for these young warrant officers and young lieutenants that are coming into the force. So again, as we look across, all of our programs of instruction, the focus is going to be increasing the warfighting skills and trying to move away from a lot of the science and getting more towards the art and balancing the technical aspects of what we need to do. And I think as the NCOs can attest, and we've looked very closely at our NCOES courses, and with ALC becoming very technically focused and building some hard technical skills, and SLC being leadership focused, that coupled with the fact that we're bringing soldiers through AIT where they get some common core that's common to all their mechanic skills, but then getting after more theory and them understanding, how things work, so they can work on multiple components or multiple aircraft. That's where we're moving into the future. And some of the devices that we've got up there at Fort Eustis, it's pretty remarkable, the things that we've been able to put into place in the last 6 months. They're going to be able to help us do that, to really increase the fidelity of the training and help our soldiers understand better how to better maintain. We're also looking, again, to the future of how do we integrate maybe some green suit maintenance into our normal maintenance down there at Fort Rucker. That's a lot of flight hours that we fly that we're not necessarily capitalizing on, that we're really focused on contractor maintenance. And so we're doing some analysis on how we can potentially do that as a part of AIT or some other potential options so we can generate a better mechanic, a better soldier out there to the force. Next slide. As we move to the future from a modernization perspective, and I know Bob Marion's going to get up here and talk a lot about the program, so I'm not going to get in a lot of detail of that, but I would tell you as we move forward, our future right now is AH-64E, UH-60 Mike, and CH-47F, and how do we maintain that capability out into 40, 50, and possibly 60? And that's going to require other modernization efforts to go along with it, other S&T work to go along with it, and then future vertical lift is going to be nested with that as we move forward. We're shooting for late 20, early 30 on future vertical lift. So I got the bully pulpit, so I can throw that one out there too, sir. And I understand we've got some fiscal constraints that are out there, but we're working through some strategies on how we can do that. We've got to do some work on the acquisition side. How do we shorten the acquisition cycle? Because we've got a lot of mature technologies out there right now that I think we can get to future vertical lift earlier, cheaper. And so we're going to neck the requirements down. We're going to look at them very closely. We'll work this with the joint community, but we've got to move faster on it, and we've got to figure out a solution for us to be able to get our feet in the water. Because if we don't get our feet in the water, it's going to die, in my opinion. So I want to move faster on it. That's where we're going. We're having a lot of discussions about it, and again, I think a lot of it's getting down to refining the requirements and really driving into our acquisition process. How can we shorten that, and how can we move forward with it? Our number one priority right now, though, as I mentioned, as we talked about UH-60 Mikes, 64 Echoes specifically, and Limas, digital Limas, is ITEP. Right now, the performance of our aircraft, and we've seen this, the Echo model is much better, but it has a shelf life based on how much we add weight to that aircraft over the next 10 or 12 years. It's going to start getting into some power issues as well, and our Mikes and Limas right now have power issues at altitude, at max gross weight, or at mission weight. So, and we need better fuel economy, we need better range, and we've got to have that better power. So, improved turbine engine program is our number one program we're concerned about right now. So, I know Bob's going to talk a little bit about the status of that, so I'm not going to get into it, but that's the number one focus we've got right now, because that's going to keep our fleet, our current fleet right now, viable out into the middle of the century. And then really taking a look. This summer, we're developing a full aviation modernization strategy. We're going to revise that and develop that and have it out. So we've got a more coherent approach, that's fully integrated, takes into account the fiscal realities that we have out there as well. But as we go into the Palm Bill, I think it'll be very important for us to have a cohesive strategy so everybody understands when they start making cuts and trades that where you have the interdependence issues between different programs, so they can understand what second and third order effects are. So that'll be coming out this summer. And then really as we look to both FVL and how do we, even on our current platforms, we're very interested in lightweight munitions. How do we reduce the weight? We can't really reduce the weight of a soldier. In fact, we're probably going to increase the weight of a soldier. We're not going to change how much gas weighs, but we can certainly figure out how to make lighter, more lethal bullets and missiles and rockets. And that's going to be one of the key S&T areas that we're focused on right now as we move forward, because that's the one place that we can take a load off the aircraft, but we've got to keep the same level of lethality that we've got today. Then we've got a lot of work going on the sustainment side of the house, bringing basically the ULSA replacement on, condition-based maintenance. I know General Collier is going to talk to some of that. And then really as we look to starting tomorrow, we're meeting with the chief, all the COE, CGs, and the PEOs, and I think the division commanders are going to meet and talk about Force 2025 of where we're going, what technologies we have today that we can integrate and bring into Force 2025, and then where do we go beyond. And we're working all the .mil PF solutions for that right now for aviation branch. So next slide. So in conclusion, as I said, we've got challenges, but I would tell you that we've got tremendous opportunities out there, and we've got to be able to master this transition. We need to have the right people in the right place. We've got to be able to see when we do have an opportunity, because they're very fleeting. Opportunities open up and then they close very quickly, so we've got to be pretty agile. That means that we've got to take a hard look at where do we have, senior aviation leaders, our colonels, lieutenant colonels, where are they positioned? What skills do they have in the enterprise to be able to help us see those opportunities? And across all three compos, being able to seize opportunities as one aviation branch. As I mentioned earlier, focusing on developing and maintaining our most talented and most importantly, really honoring the service of those that are going to leave our ranks. Because as I said earlier, we've got high quality in our branch, and we're going to lose very high quality non-commissioned officers, warrant officers, and soldiers, and we've got to make sure that we transition them right. And we've got to be able to operate at the speed of decision. That ties back into kind of number one. And then as we look to the future, we are going after, something that's faster, got better range, but it's got to be affordable, and we've got to be able to get it sooner. So we'll be asking industry for that help. And then at home station, we've definitely got to drive a culture of training the way we fight. We've got to remaster that and reinvigorate that and put the right tools in the commander's hands to be able to execute that. So as I said earlier, in the end, it's not about what we fly, and many of us have said this, it's really about our soldiers who maintain and fight those machines that's what's going to carry the day in the battle. And I really appreciate your time today, and thanks for this opportunity. Cool.